Welcome to another fabulous episode of Tickle.Life's podcast. I'm your hostess with the mostest, Gaia Morrissette, and I'm really excited for our next guest. But before we introduce our guests, I want to remind everybody that Tickle.Life's podcast, what's its mission? Its mission is to create to normalize sexuality, to let go of sexual shame, to make sex even fun and playful, and to feel good about who you are as a sexual being. Now, through that process, you'll probably hear a lot of laughing. And laughter can sometimes feel uncomfortable for the audience if it's a topic that you feel uncomfortable with. Just know that if we're laughing, it means that we feel safe and we feel comfortable, and we invite you into that space with us. All right, awesome guest.
Hello.
So I always let everybody introduce and pronounce their name because I'm dyslexic and I'm really horrible with names. So.
Hi, I am Angel Russell, they, them pronouns. And yeah, I'm happy to be here.
We're super excited to have you. So the first question I want to ask you is, what's your superpower in the world?
Oh, what's my superpower? I think my superpower is being able to hold space for conversations that are difficult for other people, like to hold space for people during difficult conversations. So that's helped me as a sex educator. That's helped me as a victim's advocate. Like I work on a rape crisis hotline. That's helped me. I end up in these, I've always worked in nonprofit. I worked for an HIV organization before that. I was working at a campus LGBT center with students who were in that coming out phase of their life. And so I think I've just always ended up in spaces where I'm sharing space with somebody who's going through something really challenging, and I get to hold space while they navigate that. And it's that I think it is a superpower. I think it's hard to find. I mean, I think that's probably one of your superpowers, is that you're able to do that for people. That's how this podcast goes so well. But yeah. It's right.
Yeah.
But I mean, I would think that, I think that's it. Like I used to joke that my superpower was that I could say penis with a straight face, which I think is how I got into the gig. But like, I think the real superpower is that if it gets if it gets rough for people, I don't make it weird, or like if it gets weird, that's okay too. Like weird is also okay.
Yeah.
So
that's awesome. So I've been asking people, what would your costume look like?
Oh, what would my costume look like? I'm sure there's a lab coat. So my business name is ProfessorSex. No. And I only say that because the superhero thing really rings true for me. It's like an X-Men reference.
Okay.
And so like, because of the whole like narrative of like the mutant and how like sexually othered people really get treated like mutants in the science world. Like literally some variations on sexuality are called mutations, which is just appalling to me. And so that really rings to me. So I really think that like my superhero costume has like a lab coat component, and there's probably like a harness bra and a collar.
Nice.
And like some tall boots. So, and if not the lab coat, I have a jean jacket I wear everywhere. It's got pins on it. And like Steve calls it my armor. So it's either the lab coat or the jean jacket, and like a harness bra and some like good jean, like tight black, like legging jeans, like jeggings, like Target jeggings, probably if I'm being honest, and like tall boots. So
nice.
Yeah, that's the costume. So
I love it. My superpower today, because I have many of them, today I want to talk about my superpower of honesty and truthful conversations. And so my superpower is that when I spend time with people, not only can I lovingly tell people the truth, and they, can handle it, but also other people feel like they just start blurting out truths that they've been holding uncontrollably.
I love that.
When I'm around.
That's amazing. Yes.
So I would say my superpower is honesty and truth.
I love it.
And I would say my outfit would probably be red leather, like a
Good.
red leather cat suit
Oh, I like it.
with like little truth electric zappers on my hands.
Ooh, that's good. What are the shoes? Are they like spiky heels
No,
or are they like
no shoes.
practical? No shoes.
No shoes. I hate shoes.
I
I'm a
love
nudist. I
that.
don't like any clothes.
Oh,
So,
okay.
so
But
I
I
don't.
mean, red leather we make exceptions for.
Oh, yes,
That's not
yes.
clothing. That's
That's
something entirely
totally
different.
different.
I like that. I'm
Yeah.
getting a great visual of that. So if you ever make that happen, let me know.
All right. Yeah. So let's talk about our conversation is going to be about your adventures into the world of poly.
Polyamory.
Yes. And for all of our listeners, polyamory is the practice of loving more than one person, and there can be a sexual intimacy component to it, but not always.
Yeah.
And also known as ethical non-monogamy, a form of ethical non-monogamy. So there's all of the lingo. So Angel,
All
let's go.
right. Yeah. Okay.
Let's start.
All
Where are we
right.
starting
I
on the
will start.
start?
We are starting. Okay. So our journey, our adventure starts in Augusta, Georgia.
Mhm.
Um,
How long ago?
This is probably been 6 or 7 years ago at this point, maybe 8 years ago at this point. I should sit down and do that math someday. The better part of a decade, we'll say that. And I was with my now ex-husband, my kid's dad. We were all living in Georgia. He was there for work, and so we had moved from our home here in Florida, which I'm now back in Florida. But it was just like a temporary thing. So we're there. And so we didn't really know a lot of people. And it was great because it had given us a chance to kind of connect with each other in new ways because we didn't, you don't know anybody else. And so you're spending a lot more time together than you might if you had a big network of friends.
Mm-hmm.
And part of kind of what had come out of that was there were some discussions around non-monogamy. We watched I hate to be a trope, but we watched that Showtime show, the polyamory married and dating show that was on Showtime for a while. Have you heard of this?
Mm-hmm.
And
But I don't remember the name of it.
It was called Polyamory Married and Dating.
Okay.
And it essentially just pictured a lot of very good looking throuple type of like, which to a married couple that was looking for some like spice, and not that we needed the spice, but spice is always fun, right? Whether and we were like, this sounds like fun. And so we didn't have any like sense of
Okay, wait. Okay, hold on. So when you were watching it, it stimulated a conversation about like what was the conversation? Let's just talk about the stimulation of that conversation by watching this show.
I think I was the one who started it. And in fact, I know that I was, because I was watching the show and I thought, I think there was a component, there's a lot of sex in the show. And so there was definitely a component of like, this is hot, but I think it was more like maybe, I liked the sense of community it seemed like these folks had. Like, I liked how close everybody seemed and how comfortable everybody seemed with each other. And it was clear everybody was dysfunctional and had problems because, I mean, that's why you watch TV.
That's what makes
it a good show.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so that was clear. And it was clear that like, you couldn't read too much into what you were seeing. Cause I mean, we know how TV works, but just something about it felt like, it's like when you learn something's possible for the first time, and you're like, I didn't know that was a thing. And it wasn't like I didn't know that was a thing and I'm okay leaving it there. It was more like, I didn't know that was a thing and how accessible is that thing to me? Mm-hmm. And the show made it seem easy. The show made it seem like anybody who, it made it seem like if you wanted to be polyamorous, just be polyamorous, that it was just a thing people did. And I don't think that's untrue, but my experience didn't like quite play out like that. Like it wasn't quite as like straightforward as all that. But
okay,
I mean,
so I want to just hold on for a sec. So I want to come back to that piece around. So you're having these thoughts and these feelings.
Yeah.
So how do you broach this with your husband who you are in a monogamous relationship with? So what do you remember what you said? Do you remember
I don't know if I remember exactly what I said. I think it was more like I'm a little I don't want to say that I'm passive aggressive, but I'm definitely the passive member of my like sexual and romantic relationships. I'm like the sub, whether we're using the language or not. I'm always very subby. Partly because I'm a little scared of rejection all the time. And so like I want to float my like desire out there, but like see if it sticks. You know what I mean? So I was like, so what do you think? You know, and I was kind of doing that, like we'd be watching the show and I'd be like, so that's cool, right? Like, and I would just kind of like gauge how he felt, but like invite him to like kind of share that whether he thought it was cool or not. And he wasn't like thrilled or he was just like neutral. He was just very like cool, you know. And he was very like down for the conversations about it. And I don't want to share too much of like his part of it because I think that's like his story, but for me, I did feel like there was an opening to keep having those conversations. And I did feel like there was a way for the two of us to keep kind of talking. And so I felt we were having conversations that were like, it wasn't off the table to discuss it, if that makes sense. It wasn't like this door shut and we could never. And I definitely think the idea of playing and of the play side of things, of, you know, playing with having, you know, other partners, just the fantasy of that, I think a lot of people can relate to. And so I didn't feel super nervous about saying, hey, wouldn't that be hot? Like, wouldn't it be hot to play with someone else? Wouldn't it be hot to whatever. So that was, I think maybe that was how I started, was like, could I get any buy-in at all?
Mm-hmm.
And then like, what if
so it
that
happens?
Yeah. So we kind of, we talked a lot. We jumped on, I don't remember if he did. I remember jumping on a dating website, which I didn't love doing because it felt like so hard to figure out how to put myself out there and not feel like I was like, I wanted to be really forthcoming about the fact that I was like married and that was like a non-negotiable part. Like I wasn't out there to like not be married anymore. But I was also out there to like explore. And I just had no clue what I was doing. So I was like, do I write that? And people weren't, I didn't know that people were even using this language at the time, because this was new language to me. Like I had just heard these words, polyamory, and like it was on like a show that was coming on at midnight on Showtime. So I could assume other people were also hearing this. And as far as I know, the show invented this language. Like I didn't know anything, you know?
Yeah.
And so, and it's funny because I had only been doing the work I do for like a year at that time. And so I knew people were non-monogamous, but I didn't even know that language. Like I knew swinging, I knew threesomes, I knew like the sex side, but I'd never seen anything like this. And so I just assumed nobody else had either. And so I was like, well, how do I get out there and like have these conversations? And so I did, but more, so I had myself on a dating website, but I was very scared to do anything with it. Like it freaked me out. It was almost like it was electrically charged. Like I would touch it and I was just, ugh. And so I would get very freaked out. And then I always felt like I had to overshare with my then husband, and not overshare, but just like, I felt like if I didn't tell him every detail, that some secret would like feel like a betrayal. And so it made it hard to have the journey be my own, if that makes sense, because I was constantly feeling like I wanted to check in, I wanted to touch base, I wanted to make sure that every step I took wasn't jeopardizing something, you know, between us. And I think, and that's not really, I know that's not really the point of this discussion, but I think we were already kind of in a space of like, we were good friends who maybe didn't really have a lot of business being married. And so that also might have been why it didn't feel like an assault to bring up the conversation. It didn't feel like an affront on anybody to say, hey, like, what does exploring things in our marriage look like? Because we didn't have this, I don't think either one of us had this concept of our marriage being like sacred, if that makes sense. Do you know what I mean? And not disrespect, but it was just our attachment to the relationship was, I think, shifting because of other stuff. And so, So anyway, I was having that, but really, I think for me, it was a lot of research. It was a lot of Googling. It was a lot of like, what is this? And I mean research. I mean like Google. I mean, I wasn't
Yeah.
like, I wasn't doing a real.
You weren't doing a study. You
No,
weren't
I
taking
wasn't
a
doing like
poll.
science. I was
No.
doing like mom science, where
Yes.
I was on my Google machine and I was getting into group settings on the internet, which was great because I did know enough to know that there were really thriving communities online.
Mm-hmm.
If you were going to be weird, if this was, and this was weird for me at the, at the time, this was
Yeah.
a very weird thing for me to be doing. So I knew if you were going to be weird, the internet was the place to do it. And so
Yeah.
I had found a group of folks on Facebook. So I was looking for people in Georgia. Like, is anybody in Georgia doing polyamory?
Yeah.
Which it turns out a lot of people in Georgia are doing polyamory. But at the time, I was like, sure, I was the only one. And so, I get on the internet and I find this very thriving community of folks in Georgia who are doing polyamory. And there's a convention in Georgia called Atlanta Poly Weekend. It started as like a meetup group that just grew and grew and grew and grew because every single person who thought they were the only one realized they weren't, and it
Yep.
blew up really big. And so then there's this huge thriving community 2 hours from me, and I was like, oh my God, like this is like I could be there. I could do this. And then they had a conference coming up they had a con coming up, and so I jumped into the con group and I was just listening. Like they let me into the like Facebook group for the con for like attendees, even though I hadn't purchased a ticket yet. And so I was just watching and I was making new friends. And I don't think he'll mind me saying this. I met a guy named Billy Holder. He was a big part of Atlanta Poly Weekend at the time. And he Relationship Equality Foundation, like he does a lot of that stuff. But that was kind of before all that, before REF existed. And he just befriended me really quickly. And it was very sincere. He wasn't trying to date me. He wasn't trying to, maybe he was, I don't know, but he didn't come across that way. He was very, very kind and very warm. And so this thing that had been scary, like on the dating apps, it felt very horrifying. It felt like a bear trap. This didn't feel like that at all. This just felt like people were being really nice to me. And I didn't feel, the dating apps felt very predatory. It felt like all this pressure to like, well, like, dating is so much pressure sometimes. And I was like, oh, I'm gonna have to go out and then I'm gonna have to discuss like, is sex on the table? And I hadn't even thought about any of that really, because again, I'm coming from almost a decade of being in a monogamous relationship. And before that, I was raised in church. Like I just had these ideas about what I was like air quotes supposed to be doing. And then now I'm going like, okay, there's another way, but I don't, so it was nice. It was nice because he was he was just so nice to me. And so he invited me to come to the con, and it was a lot of money. And I was actually more worried about spending the money than I was about going. And so I was talking to my therapist about all of this stuff. And we had made a couple forays into like meeting new people, my ex and I think my ex was deciding this wasn't really for him. And so, he was never like, I think really attached to the idea. So for him to say like, no, I'm good, I wasn't ready to say like, no, I'm good. And I knew that might be a problem because we didn't have the kind of relationship where one of us could be and one of us couldn't be. And so I was like, oh, and I was really freaked out. I told my therapist, like, I can't let it go. I can't stop thinking about this. I can't stop. Like, I want to talk about it. And I think my husband's feeling like it's borderline consent violation for me to keep bringing this up because he just is like, I'm really not into this. And I'm just like, but I couldn't stop thinking about it. And so my therapist said, I think you should go. I think you should go to the con. And I invited I invited my ex to go with me. He didn't want to go. So I took my best friend at the time. She came with me because I didn't want to go by myself. And I offered to teach yoga there. I was teaching yoga in Georgia. I was managing a yoga studio. And so I offered to teach a couple of morning yoga classes. I did a morning, we did like a heavy metal yoga at like 8 a.m. It was a lot of fun. And so I got in there and they said, if you teach yoga, we'll like waive your fee. And so I just had to pay for the hotel room, which was great. So I was like, all right, I'm in. So my best friend and I went to Atlanta to do this thing.
And so while you're going there, you're on your way there. How are you feeling? Like, are you nervous, excited, anticipation? Are you like, what's running through you?
All of it. I liked having a purpose, right? It was almost like I could pretend that I was just going there for the yoga.
Yeah. Oh,
Like,
yes.
even though we all knew like there was like the yoga was my ticket, right? But
Yes.
that had nothing to do with why I had shown up. But I had a reason. I had a reason to be there. So
Mhm.
that if I got there and decided it was horrible, I had a reason to still be there.
Yeah.
I wasn't totally out of place.
Yeah.
And so I could kind of decide I can either go and introduce myself to everybody as a vendor,
Yeah.
or I can introduce myself to everybody as like a member of the space, or I can go be new, or I can go be nothing because my best friend is here and we can be introverts together. And I'm not an introvert, but she is. And I said, we could just do that together and just get drunk in the hotel room and pretend this never happened. And so I had kind of given myself a few outs.
Nice.
So,
You had lots of options, which is
I,
very Polly-like.
I know I'm looking back, it really made a lot of sense. I like to keep my options open. So yeah, but so I was nervous. I was feeling kind of bad because I knew that because the thing was, it also meant that it's not like everything was really perfect in the relationship and then with my ex, and then this was the catalyst of not. And I think a lot of my family thought it was later. Like I think later my family thought Angel left her husband to be a crazy lesbian at a commune or something. Like I think that they like that there was this impression, and that's not what happened. And I know he knows that's not what happened, but because there's always that conversation when a relationship's over. There's some conversation that's like the match on the pile,
Yeah.
and this happened to be that. And so I think I was nervous. I was worried. I was a little afraid I would like it.
Mm-hmm.
I was afraid I would get there and want to stay. I was afraid I would get there and like these people because I was afraid of what that would mean. I was worried. I had spent a lot of time up to that point talking, and like it had been many months in therapy of conversations around this. It had been many months of conversation. This wasn't like we watched this and then the next weekend I was there. This was the passage of time was the better part of a year.
Mm-hmm.
And so
you get there.
I tell people this is one of my favorite moments is I got there and I can only describe the feeling as like coming home, like the way it feels in your heart when you've been away from home for a long time.
Mm-hmm.
And then you pull into your driveway and you're just like, oh, and you kind of feel like relieved to be like done with whatever the trip was, no matter how great the trip was. It felt like that. It felt like I was coming home. It was I don't know how to explain it. I didn't know anybody. I knew Billy, and I knew the few people who had been, really nice to me about once I was in as a vendor. I had to start connecting with people because they were, getting passes set up and stuff. And so everybody I talked to was very nice. So I had people that I was like anchored to, but I didn't have like friends except my friend there who was very much like a spectator. She's like, no, I'm here for you. But like, so she was very supportive, but not, it was my journey, which was kind of cool. But yeah, it felt like coming home, and I just immediately, it was simultaneously like coming home and like being a little kid at Disney for the first time.
Yes.
Like where it's just this sort of unadulterated joy. Like as an adult at Disney, you're very aware of how much everything costs. But as like a kid at Disney, it's just like magic. Like these things just appear in front of you and they're beautiful and wonderful and they make you feel so happy and bubbly. And so it was a lot of joy and it was a lot of excitement. And I also didn't know ahead of time how tight knit the community was. So I also was a little bit of like a new shiny for some folks there.
Yes.
Because they all knew each other. And so here's this like new person. And I, looking back, I realized how small the poly community is and how fun new people are. And so I was like, I think I got a lot of, I don't think people would have been less kind to me had they known me, but the energy is different with a new person. You kind of, it's when you have company over, so I wasn't in my home. I was in someone else's home, and they were rolling out the carpet for me and they were being very nice. And they all came to my yoga class and it was very cool. I had a good time. Like I couldn't believe I had people that got up at 8 a.m. to come to my yoga class. And I really think it was just because they were trying to make me feel welcome and trying to like be nice to me. And some of them were trying to flirt with me, which was really cool attention.
Yeah.
And
so how did that feel? How did that feel around what were some of your thoughts and experiences of happening around people flirting with you? And what and the potential sexual energy that was going along with that, and the possibilities. And before you went, were you allowed to act upon anything on a sexual level? Like what kind of happened in that realm?
Well, we didn't really talk about it ahead of time. We didn't really talk about what was or wasn't game.
Okay.
And so because I don't even think I wish we had, because it gave me a lot of, I felt like maybe it gave me a lot of like, I didn't feel like I was making choices based on whether or not I had rules.
Mm-hmm.
I think it was just this understanding that like I was going here because I needed to figure this out.
Mm-hmm.
But I also knew for me that sex would complicate that. Like I
Okay.
knew that if I went, I kind of had to take sex off the table before I got in the car and drove there, because one, I would have felt guilty. Even if my ex had said, go for it, have a great time, I still probably would have, because everything was so new.
Mm-hmm.
And I just needed to like strip away as much of that for myself as I could and just have the most pure experience that was possible for me. And so I was open to flirting, and I was open to that energy, and I was open to meeting people and seeing how that felt, because that was going to be part of the experience. Was this even possible for me?
Mm-hmm.
But I knew I had no intention of having any kind of like romantic or especially not sexual connection with anybody. And it felt good because I think I was able to make that choice for me, and not because my ex said, you're not allowed to do this, which is probably what he would have said if I had asked him. Like he probably would have said like, no. So, but it was less, I definitely respected him, but it was more out of like this sense of like knowing what I needed in that process. And I think that was all yoga. I think I'd done years of yoga ahead of time. I had a lot of self-awareness around like what my emotional needs were,
Mm-hmm.
which I think was what awakened this process of figuring out who I was to begin with. Like, I don't think I would have ever been open to this possibility had I not gone through what I went through with my yoga teacher training, with the retreats I had been on, with the amazing amount of time I had spent in meditation and spent in like going inward
Mm-hmm.
and saying like, who is this person? Like that for me, opened up the opportunity to even recognize that this could exist.
Okay, so you being flirted with. How you
Yeah.
feeling?
Okay. I remember very distinctly two good flirt moments. The first one was, and again, I don't think that they will mind me telling this story at all. Dr. Liz Powell. So I don't know, we do video for this too, right? Like we record these.
Yeah.
So my tattoo, so if people are listening and not watching, I'm showing my tattoo on my arm. This is actually, Liz and I have matching tattoos. It's a Sagittarius and a Scorpio. Sagittarius for me, Scorpio for Liz. We met there. Liz, so at the time I still had the purple hair, but it was very, very long. And I spent my whole weekend in like yoga clothes, which make people look great. Like I knew what I was doing. And so I had on like my great like yoga pants and like the flowy shirt. I nailed the look.
Yeah.
And so Liz walked up behind me and said, oh my God, I love your hair. But it was the most like bold flirting that a feminine person had ever done with me, where I knew I was being flirted with. Like it was so intentional and so good. I don't have those flirting skills, but man, Liz nailed it. And nothing in the world had ever existed until that moment. And I remember like looking over and like seeing Liz, and I just like think my heart stopped for a second, and I was just like, my jaw hit the floor, and I was like, who is this creature? And like, why are they talking to me? And so I felt very like taken out of it. Like I'm blushing now thinking about it.
Yes, I know. It's awesome.
I haven't thought about that feeling in a long time. I mean, we talk about how we met a lot, but yeah. And so there was just this very instant connection. And to this day, Liz and I are very much twin flame. But in that moment, I definitely wouldn't have had any language to describe it, but it was this very like I'm going to know this person my whole life. And so immediately we just had, we were just going to be spending a lot of time together. And I just knew it. I just knew that I was going to see them throughout the conference. I knew that I was going to see them. And I just was like looking at that point, the rest of the weekend, I was looking for opportunities to like sit with them. And they were like showing me around, and they were going to like conferences, and they were still doing their own thing too. And I had, I think they had a partner who had come up at the end of the conference to hang a little bit. And they were also from Georgia, a different part of Georgia. They were in a different part of Georgia. So they had driven in too, but they knew some people. And so, but I don't know. Yeah, I just was like dazzled. I was dazzled. And so that felt really good. That felt very magical. Lots of people flirting. That energy was good. I like being flirted with. I've always been a big flirt. I have a very extroverted person. I have a very flirt personality anyway. Like I'm like a uber Sagittarius. And so I was that was fun. But then the second moment where I kind of had that like, oh no, I'm really being flirted with. It wasn't as obvious at first for me because Sterling Bates was doing a talk on personality. And I'm a big science geek, and I hadn't gone into personality science yet, but I think I'd been drawn to it for a while. And so I was like, oh, I wanted to go. And I ended up missing Sterling's talk because it was right after my yoga thing, and I had made a deal. There were some folks teaching a burlesque class right after my yoga thing. So I made a deal with them that if they came to my yoga thing, I would go to their burlesque thing. Yeah. And so then I sent my best friend to Sterling's thing because I was like, you got to go to the personality talk. Like, this looks very cool. And it was, and it's brilliant. It was a very cool talk. And so I sent him to the talk, or sent my friend to the talk. And so later I said, I heard your talk was amazing. And so he was like, oh, well, if you want, I'll just share the like stuff with you. And I thought he meant like email me the slides. And so I'm coming down for dinner later, and he's like got his little computer, and he's like, let me show you the stuff. And he wanted to like sit with me. So everybody else is like off having dinner, and I'm sitting in this little like empty part of the hotel in the dark, like looking at slides with him. And now I know him very well. And I realized, like, at the time, I didn't realize that was him flirting with me. Like, I really thought he was just like really excited about his research. I don't know why I thought him giving up that huge portion of his weekend wasn't interested in me. But I was so geeked out. And so we kind of nerd flirted with each other in like a really
nice.
Yeah. And so it was a different type of, but that was also a connection where like to this day, we're still connected. We're still friends. We're still really close. And he's like a really important part of my life. Just knowing him has been a real gift. And, but it was like my brain was being flirted with, if that makes sense. And yeah. So it was I don't know, just in both cases, it was like an energy that I hadn't had in my life and it was happening at the same time. It was like, it was okay that Liz was flirting with me. And I knew that it would be okay if Liz saw me sitting alone with Sterling. Like, it was like the permission in the space was really liberating. And I think that was the part of it that I remembered the most, was that feeling of not like looking over my shoulder, wondering if I was like, am I going to mess up my chances to spend more time with this person because I'm saying hi to this person? If I go to coffee with this person, is it going to mean that this person won't want to have drinks with me later? Like, it was very like, the invitation was make connections you're going to make and make them organically and let them happen and experience that. And that was the invitation for the whole weekend for everybody. That was just the air, the energy. Mm-hmm. And everybody who had been moving through that space for a while was doing a pretty good job of making those connections, and they were just
So what did you come away from that experience, and what happens
next?
That's what happens next in your marriage at that point. And okay, so that we can just for time purposes, so we can kind of close stuff up, and then we can find out more about how people can spend time with you.
Yeah. Okay. So we left the conference. I exchanged, some numbers with folks, more as like a lot of friendship connections. I made a lot of friend connections, and that felt really good. And then I spent the whole time driving home talking about what a good time I'd had. And I felt good about the connections because even though, like I said, I'd had these moments of like joy, I never felt like it was a betrayal of anything.
Yep.
And I think for my ex, I think he was really hoping I would have a bad time, not because he wanted me to have a bad time, but because, again, it was kind of one more thing in what was going on with us. And so it meant we were going to have, if I was having a good time, it was going to take some difficult conversations we'd been delaying and bring them to the forefront.
Yes.
And so that is what happened is I got home and I did have because I'd had a good time, I was honest with him about, that I'd had a good time. And I told him about how things went. And we, I think for us, it was like, it had just become so undeniable over the two, honestly, probably 2 years prior to that, it became so undeniable that we were just such different people and that our ideal lives were very different. Mm-hmm. And so our mutual respect for each other and our care for each other was not going to sustain a marriage, and especially not a monogamous one. Mm-hmm. And that was tough because you've got two people who really care about each other.
Yeah.
And so it wasn't like there was anger. I mean, there might have been some, but generally, like the feeling between us wasn't, it didn't come from some big, like, you betrayed me, you're angry, you're this, you're that. It was just like a bummer. It was a real bummer. Mm-hmm. And it was sad. There was a lot of sad, but there was also, I don't know if he would say this, but I see the way he lives his life now and he seems very happy. And he's got a beautiful wife and they live a beautiful life and he seems very full of joy and he's living a much more authentic version of himself, I think, than the one he got to live with me. And we talk about it with the kids a lot because they see how different our homes are, and we talk a lot about how important it is to do the work to know who you are. Mm-hmm. Because when you're tying your life to someone else, if you can't get on the same page, it's going to make it tough.
Yeah.
And so I don't think at the time I don't think he would have said I was doing him any favors at the time, but I do think now it's very clear to both of us that if we met now, there wouldn't be any like question of us getting married or anything, but we get along, we co-parent really well. And so I think that was, I think my commitment to honesty throughout it, mm-hmm. even when the conversations were really hard, was what kept it from becoming this really toxic, cancerous thing between us. And so even though things didn't work out, it wasn't like, it didn't rip our family apart. It wasn't like that. It didn't feel like this. Everybody felt like whole people at the end still, even with heartbreak.
Beautiful. That's beautiful.
Thanks.
So the audience wants to know, are you poly?
I am. So
did it win out?
You threw the spaghetti at the wall. Did it stick? Was it done? Yeah, I am. I am non-monogamous, polyamorous. I'm not always in love with the language of polyamory, but I think it's not a bad way to describe what I am. So I'm married. I've got my Steve, who is amazing, and we co-parent here and in the house. And then I also have my girlfriend Lexi, who's fantastic, and she's married and she's got partners, and she's been longtime polyamorous. She's really, really good at it. And I still am very. Liz and I, our hearts are tied forever. That story. I have a squish named Ariel who lives in Orlando, and so I just have these really special people in my life, and it's I am still, and it's great because it feels really good. It's good. It's really good. Yeah, my kids know about polyamory. They've met, they hang out with Lexi, and Lexi and her husband come over and hang out, and they've met, they know about Liz. They've met Liz. Liz came and visited. She doesn't live here, or they don't live here, but they came to visit. And so they know, the kids like they watched me at Valentine's Day getting I made dinner for Lexi. It was like our first Valentine's together, and so Lorelai was helping me figure out what I was going to take over to Lexi's house to make for dinner, and what was I going to wear, help me pick out my outfit. So the kids are really good sports. They've also watched me come out as non-binary. They know I'm queer. The kids have watched me have this great journey. So I am polyamorous, and it's great, and I love it. And my parents hate it. My mom refuses to talk about it. Lexi's just a friend. So Mom, if you ever hear this, I'm sorry.
and maybe you should come back and we should do another show about the effect of coming out. And the effect of coming out as poly and ethically non-monogamous, and the effects of, you know, the people around us. I think that would be great. Another great show that you should come back on to do.
I would do that. It'll probably be less laughter and more tears, but yeah,
Yes.
it would.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a harder conversation for sure.
Yeah.
But yeah, I'd be happy to do that.
That'd be great. So how can people spend more time with the fabulous you?
Okay. I'm in all this,
In a
the
professional
professional. Yes, I was gonna say
capacity. Yes.
I'm polysaturated, so they can't. No. So ProfessorSex.com is my space. And all the social media links are there. There's the YouTube is there. Links to all my projects are there. So I would say that. I also have a Patreon. And so people who want a little bit more of like the hybrid between like more personal chats like this, I do like coffee dates with my Patreon folks, and we have like a drink night coming up because not everybody wants to do Sunday mornings. But yeah, so if people want to like subscribe to the Patreon, they get a little bit more behind the scenes time with Steve and I and the other people in our lives. But if they're just wanting to, or they can support us, Patreon's great for that. But yeah, ProfessorSex.com, all the links are there. And yeah, it's got more about me and my story.
That's beautiful. Thanks for being on the show. It was so
Thank
lovely.
you. Yeah, that was I've never told that story that way before. So that was cool. Thank you.
You're welcome. All right. Juicy, wonderful, awesome listeners. I hope this inspired you to maybe look at, if I'm curious about, maybe I might want to look at going to one of these polycons. There's a lot of possibilities that can happen there. I hope that inspired that. I also hope that this conversation inspired maybe some difficult conversations with yourself of your desires and your wants and how being in line with yourself, and maybe some difficult conversations that might need to happen with, you know, the current people in your life around that. And don't forget to check out Tickle.Life. And if you want to spend more time with me, you can find me at GaiaMorrissette.com. And don't forget to check out My Orgasmic Life, which is my other podcast where you get
it's a good one.
Where you get to hear maybe a little bit too much about my life. So it's great for all you voyeurs. That's a great place to spend time with me. All right, thanks for listening, and we'll see you. You'll hear me in our next show. Mwah. Bye-bye.